Remove him from my house before he stains the floor with more than garden soil." Vanessa Langley's voice cut through the Rosemont ballroom with the polished cruelty of a silver blade, and every conversation beneath the crystal chandeliers died at once. At the far end of the room stood the gardener, his rough brown coat still marked with earth, one hand resting at his side, while rain darkened the shoulders of his clothing. He had entered through the main doors as though he belonged among the silk gowns, jeweled collars, and men who measured worth by inheritance. Clara Bennett stood near the servants' passage holding an empty tray. She felt every eye turn toward him, then toward her, because everyone in Rosemont knew she had been seen speaking with Mr. Hale among the roses. Vanessa descended the marble steps slowly, enjoying the silence she had created. "You were dismissed this morning," she said. "A servant who ignores an order is either foolish or dishonest." The gardener's expression did not change. His dark hair was damp from the storm, and his gray eyes held a steadiness that seemed strangely out of place in a man expected to lower his gaze. "I came because something was taken from Miss Bennett," he replied. A murmur moved through the guests. Vanessa smiled. "And now the gardener speaks for poor relations." Clara set the tray down before her hands could betray their trembling. 10 days earlier, she had believed Elias Hale was simply a quiet man hired to repair the neglected grounds. She had given him water beneath the summer sun. She had trusted his silence. Then she had learned that nearly everything about him was concealed. Yet when 2 footmen stepped forward, Clara moved between them and the man who had deceived her. Aunt Eleanor whispered her name in warning. Clara ignored it. "He will leave when he chooses," she said. Vanessa's face hardened. "You would defend him after everything?" Clara looked at the gardener. Pain tightened beneath her ribs, not because he appeared powerless, but because she knew he was not what he claimed to be. Still, a lie did not make cruelty honorable. "I will defend any man being condemned without proof." Vanessa laughed softly. "You risk your home for someone who owns nothing. A man's poverty does not make your accusation true." The gardener studied Clara with an emotion she could not name. Gratitude was there, but so was regret. He stepped closer, though he kept several feet between them. "Would you still defend me?" he asked quietly. "If you knew I had deceived you?" The ballroom seemed to contract around the question. Clara remembered the calluses on his hands, the intelligence he had tried to hide, and the nobleman's ring mark beneath the soil on his finger. She remembered giving him the last of her water because no one else had stopped. "I am defending what is right," she said. "Not what you told me." The main doors opened behind him. Thomas Reed, Rosemont's elderly steward, entered wearing formal black. For 20 years, no guest had seen him bow to anyone beneath the rank of nobility. He crossed the ballroom, stopped before the gardener, and lowered himself with perfect ceremony. "Your Grace," he said. No one breathed. Vanessa's smile vanished. Aunt Eleanor gripped the railing. Clara stared at the man she had known as Elias Hale, while a servant removed his weathered coat and revealed the dark formal attire beneath it, along with the silver crest of Ravenshire. Duke Nathaniel Whitmore turned toward the room, but his eyes found only Clara. She had imagined that discovering the truth would make her feel foolish. Instead, she felt betrayed. The most powerful man in the county had entered their lives through the servants' gate, listened to every secret, and watched every humiliation without revealing who he was. Nathaniel's voice remained calm. "No one will remove me from Rosemont." Then he looked at Vanessa. "But before this night ends, someone else will leave this house." Clara saw fear enter her cousin's face and understood that the Duke had not come to reveal only his title. He had come to reveal what he had discovered. 10 days earlier, Duke Nathaniel Whitmore entered Rosemont through the servants' gate beneath a sky bleached white by summer heat. He wore a plain linen shirt, worn boots, and the name Elias Hale, while his ducal signet ring remained locked inside a leather case carried by Thomas Reed. The steward alone knew why the master of Ravenshire had returned disguised as a gardener. Nathaniel's counsel had urged him to marry Vanessa Langley, whose family controlled the neighboring estate and claimed that the union would secure both properties for another generation. The proposal appeared sensible on paper. So had his former engagement. Years earlier, Nathaniel had nearly married a woman whose affection vanished the moment his inheritance seemed uncertain. Since then, every gracious smile had looked rehearsed, and every compliment had sounded like a bargain awaiting payment. Rosemont offered him more than a prospective bride. Its accounts had shown missing rent, altered boundaries, and payments connected to the Bennett family, whose name had disappeared from Ravenshire records without explanation. Nathaniel intended to observe the Langleys before they knew the Duke was watching. By noon, the temperature had climbed above 90 degrees. The gardeners worked beneath an unforgiving sun while guests crossed the lawn carrying parasols and glasses of iced lemonade. Vanessa passed Nathaniel twice without looking at him. Her mother complained that the roses lacked color. A footman ordered him to repair a blocked irrigation channel before the evening gathering. No one offered water. Nathaniel was kneeling beside the dry stone channel when a shadow fell across his hands. He looked up and saw a young woman holding a copper cup. Her faded blue dress had been carefully mended at one sleeve, and several loose strands of chestnut hair clung to her temple. She appeared tired, yet her pale blue eyes held no pity. "Drink," she said. Nathaniel glanced toward the terrace, where an older woman was calling for her. "That water was meant for you. Water can be replaced." She held the cup closer. "A man who collapses in this heat is harder to replace." He accepted it. The water was warm, but it tasted cleaner than anything served in a crystal glass. "Why did you stop?" he asked. She looked genuinely puzzled. "Because no one else did. You do not know me. Thirst does not require an introduction." Nathaniel drank, then noticed the faded crest stamped into the cup's handle. Bennett, the same name missing from the estate records. "Is this yours?" he asked. Her expression changed. She took the cup from him and covered the crest with her thumb. "It belonged to my father." Before Nathaniel could ask more, Vanessa called sharply from the terrace. "Clara, the guests are waiting. Do not waste the good water on hired hands." Clara Bennett lowered her gaze, but not before Nathaniel saw humiliation flicker across her face. She turned to leave, then paused. "The irrigation channel is not blocked near the fountain," she said quietly. "The clay pipe beneath the eastern rose bed cracked last winter. Dig 3 feet past the white stones." Nathaniel followed her instructions and found the break exactly where she had predicted. By evening, water flowed through the garden again. From the servants' corridor, he watched Clara carry trays for relatives who never thanked her, correct household accounts no one understood, and kneel beside an elderly maid to repair a torn shoe. Her kindness was not reserved for a man she found interesting. It was simply the manner in which she moved through a world that rarely returned it. Later, Thomas met Nathaniel beside the greenhouse. "What did you learn, Your Grace?" Nathaniel looked toward the window where Clara stood alone, washing the copper cup. "That the family wishes me to marry the wrong woman." Thomas followed his gaze. "And the Bennett crest?" Nathaniel's expression hardened. "Someone erased her father from my records." He removed the plain glove from his right hand, revealing the pale mark where his signet ring usually rested. "Find out why." The following morning, Clara rose before the household bells and crossed Rosemont with a basket of mended linens balanced against her hip. The corridors were still cool, carrying the faint scent of beeswax and yesterday's roses, while beyond the windows the gardens waited beneath a veil of silver mist. She moved quietly because quietness had become a form of survival in a house where gratitude was rare and mistakes were remembered longer than kindness. By 7 o'clock, she had corrected the kitchen accounts, delivered medicine to an elderly maid, and replaced the wilted flowers in Aunt Eleanor's sitting room. Vanessa entered just as Clara finished arranging the vase. "The blue ribbons are for tonight's table," she said. "You used them in the wrong room." Clara looked at the plain white ribbon in her hand. "These are not blue." Vanessa glanced at the vase without embarrassment. "Then find the blue ones. And mend my garden gloves before luncheon." She left without waiting for an answer. Clara carried the empty flower basket outside, where the heat was already beginning to rise from the stone paths. Near the eastern rose bed, Elias Hale was lifting broken sections of clay pipe from the soil. His sleeves were rolled to his forearms, and dirt marked his hands, but there was nothing careless in the way he worked. Every movement was measured, almost disciplined. "You found the break," Clara said. He looked up. "Exactly where you said it would be. My father taught me how the old irrigation lines were laid." "Your father understood this estate?" The question sounded casual, but his attention sharpened. Clara set down the basket. "He managed part of Ravenshire's southern land before I was born. Later, he kept Rosemont's gardens and accounts." "Why did he leave?" "He did not leave." Her voice cooled. "He was dismissed." Elias lowered the pipe. "For what reason?" No one ever gave one that made sense. Clara regretted the answer as soon as it escaped. She rarely spoke of Samuel Bennet, especially to strangers. Yet Elias listened without offering pity or empty reassurance. He simply waited. After his death, she continued, his records disappeared. Aunt Eleanor allowed me to remain here, but only because she said family duty required it. Does she treat you as family? Clara gave a faint smile. Rosemont has many definitions for that word. She knelt beside the nearest rosebush and touched a yellowing leaf. The roots are drowning. The new channel carries too much water to this bed. Elias examined the soil. The head gardener said the roses needed more. The head gardener has not noticed the blackening near the stems. He looked where she pointed. You are right. You sound surprised. I am surprised that no one asked your opinion. Clara brushed soil from her fingers. People rarely ask advice from someone who owns nothing. Elias studied her with an expression she could not read. Ownership and knowledge are not the same thing. Together they redirected the water, working in companionable silence. When he asked how to bind a damaged stem, Clara demonstrated with a strip of cloth. He followed her instructions too carefully for a man accustomed to taking orders. Later, he identified a rare white rose as a royal Avellini before Clara named it. He also corrected her mention of an inheritance statute, using language no ordinary gardener would know. She looked at him more closely. Beneath the soil on his right hand, a pale ring mark circled one finger. You have worked on noble estates before, she said. Several. Close enough to study their laws? His gaze met hers. A gardener hears more than people imagine. Clara did not believe him. Before she could press further, Vanessa called from the terrace and ordered her inside. As Clara lifted the basket, she saw Elias close his fist over the missing ring mark. For the first time, she wondered whether the man in the garden was not hiding poverty, but power. For the next 2 days, Clara watched Elias hail with the quiet patience her father had once taught her to use when identifying a plant that did not belong in familiar soil. The gardener spoke little, yet every answer revealed more than he intended. He knew which roses had been cultivated for royal conservatories. He understood why an old boundary agreement could not be altered without the landholder's seal. When a delivery cart arrived with tools from Ravenshire, the driver nearly bowed before catching himself. Elias dismissed the mistake with a glance, but Clara saw it. On the third afternoon, she found him inside the neglected greenhouse, studying Samuel Bennet's weathered notebook. Sunlight entered through cracked glass and fell across the page in narrow golden bars. That was my father's, she said. Elias closed the book at once. I found it beneath a planting table and decided to read it. The cover bears no name. Clara crossed the room and held out her hand. You recognized the Bennet crest on my cup. You knew whose book it was. He returned it without protest. The gesture was respectful, but his silence felt carefully built. Clara opened the notebook. Her father's drawings of medicinal plants filled the first pages, followed by irrigation measurements and notes about tenant fields. Near the back, several columns of numbers had been circled in dark ink. Do these figures mean anything to you? Elias asked. They are rent collections. From Rosemont. From the southern Ravenshire farms. Clara looked up. A gardener should not recognize estate ledgers so quickly. His expression remained calm. And a poor relation should not understand them better than the family that owns the house. The words were meant as praise, yet they struck the wall between them. You have asked about my father from the moment we met, she said. You know laws no hired man has reason to study. You hide the hand where a signet ring once rested. Who are you? For the first time, he looked uncertain. It was only a breath, a slight tightening near his eyes, but Clara saw it. A man trying to understand what happened here. That is not a name. Names often prevent honest answers. Clara closed the notebook. So does deception. Outside, wind moved through the rose beds, carrying their fragrance into the warm glass room. Elias stepped toward a cracked window latch and repaired it with a small iron tool. His hands were capable, though not hardened by years of labor. Suppose a man wished to learn how people behaved when they believed he had nothing to offer, he said. Would you condemn him for concealing what he possessed? That depends on what he took while hiding. He turned toward her. What could he take? Trust. The single word changed the air between them. His gaze lowered to the notebook in her hands. Your father recorded payments that do not appear in the official Ravenshire accounts. Clara's pulse quickened. How could you know what appears in those accounts? Elias did not answer. Instead, he pointed to a line Samuel had marked with a small drawing of a pear tree. Beneath it were 3 numbers, and the words were the roots remember. Did your father use symbols to mark hiding places? He asked. Clara stared at the drawing. Behind Rosemont's abandoned herb garden stood an ancient pear tree her father had tended until the year he was dismissed. No one had touched the ground beneath it since his death. She closed the notebook and stepped toward the greenhouse door. I will examine it myself. Elias moved aside, allowing her to pass. Clara. It was the first time he had spoken her name without formality. She stopped but did not turn. Whatever you find may concern people with more power than you expect. Then perhaps they should have been more careful about what they buried. She walked into the fading sunlight, unaware that Vanessa stood beyond the greenhouse wall, hidden behind climbing ivy, listening as Elias quietly instructed Thomas Reed to bring him the sealed Ravenshire ledgers before nightfall. By the following afternoon, Rosemont had become a house of whispers. Vanessa moved through the rooms with unusual sweetness, praising servants she normally ignored and asking Clara whether she had slept well, as though kindness could erase the tension growing beneath every polished surface. Clara trusted the change even less than open cruelty. She kept Samuel Bennett's notebook hidden beneath the lining of her small traveling trunk and waited for dusk, when the herb garden would be empty. Elias found her near the eastern corridor before she could leave. You should not go alone, he said. Clara continued fastening her cloak. You have offered me very few reasons to accept your protection. His expression tightened. Then accept my knowledge of the grounds. Knowledge is not honesty. The word struck him, but he did not turn away. No, he said. It is not. Before Clara could answer, Vanessa entered with Aunt Eleanor and 2 guests from the neighboring estate. A diamond bracelet gleamed on Vanessa's wrist. There you are, she said brightly. I have been searching everywhere for this. She removed the bracelet and placed it on a nearby table. It vanished from my room this morning. Her gaze shifted toward Elias. The gardener was seen near the west staircase. Elias remained still. Clara saw the design at once. The accusation was too polished, the witnesses too conveniently present. Vanessa opened the door to the tool room and instructed a footman to search the shelves. Moments later, he returned holding the bracelet wrapped in a scrap of gardening cloth. Aunt Eleanor pressed one hand to her chest. How disgraceful. Vanessa looked at Elias with satisfaction. You will leave Rosemont immediately. Clara stepped forward. He could not have taken it. Every face turned toward her. Vanessa's voice softened. And how would you know? Clara remembered the hours beside the broken irrigation line. She remembered Elias in the greenhouse, reading her father's notebook without permission. She remembered every answer he had refused to give. Still, truth did not become less true because the man beside her had secrets. He was in the eastern garden with me during the time you claimed the bracelet disappeared. Vanessa's smile sharpened. You would risk your word for a hired man. I would risk it against a false accusation. Aunt Eleanor moved closer. Clara, think carefully. You live beneath this roof because this family has shown you mercy. Mercy does not require silence when someone is being wronged. A murmur moved through the room. Elias looked at Clara with quiet astonishment, but she refused to meet his eyes. Vanessa lifted the bracelet. Perhaps you helped him. Clara felt the insult burn, yet her voice remained steady. A man's poverty does not make your lie true. The sweetness vanished from Vanessa's face. Then you may leave with him. Aunt Eleanor said nothing. Her silence was agreement. Clara looked around the room that had sheltered her without ever allowing her to belong. Very well. Elias stepped forward. This has gone far enough. Thomas Reed appeared in the doorway and gave him a warning glance. The steward carried the sealed Ravenshire ledgers beneath one arm. Elias saw them, then looked back at Clara. For one suspended moment, she expected him to reveal whatever power hid beneath the name Hale. Instead, he remained silent. The choice wounded her more than Vanessa's accusation. Clara returned to her room and packed the few dresses she owned. When Elias found her near the servants' entrance, the sun had begun to sink behind the elm trees. Clara, I can explain. She lifted the copper cup from her bag and placed it in his hands. I gave you water because I thought you were honest. His fingers closed around the faded Bennett crest. I never wished to harm you. Intent does not repair trust. She walked toward the herb garden without looking back. Beneath the ancient pear tree, the soil had already been disturbed. Someone had reached her father's secret before she did. Clara knelt beside the ancient pear tree and pressed her hand against the loosened earth. The soil was dark and freshly turned, but whoever had searched there had worked in haste. A narrow section near the roots remained untouched. She set down her traveling bag, removed the small garden trowel from her father's old basket, and began to dig. The evening air smelled of crushed mint and rain waiting beyond the hills. Behind her, footsteps approached across the gravel path. She did not look up. "If you have come to offer another explanation," she said, "I have heard enough words for one day." Elias stopped several feet away. "I came because the ground was disturbed before you arrived." Clara uncovered a rusted corner of metal. Together, though not side by side, they cleared the soil until a small tin box emerged beneath the roots. The lock had been forced, but the lid remained closed. Clara lifted it carefully. Inside lay a folded letter, an old wax seal bearing the Bennett crest, and several pages of copied accounts wrapped in oilcloth. Her hands trembled as she opened the letter. Samuel Bennett's handwriting crossed the first page in firm black lines. He wrote that Rosemont rents had been redirected for years through false repairs and invented labor costs. The money should have gone to Ravenshire tenants, irrigation systems, and winter grain reserves. Instead, it had been transferred into private Langley accounts. Clara read each sentence slowly, feeling her father return through the disciplined shape of every word. "He discovered everything," she whispered. Elias stood in silence, his expression no longer guarded but grave. These account numbers matched the discrepancies in the Ravenshire ledgers. Clara looked up sharply. "You have seen those ledgers?" "Yes." "A gardener does not have access to sealed estate records." The lie between them could no longer survive. Elias removed the worn glove from his right hand. The pale mark Clara had noticed now seemed almost an accusation. "My name is not Elias Hale." She closed her fingers around the letter. "I already knew that much. I came to Rosemont to investigate the missing rents, and the family proposed as an alliance to my estate." "Your estate?" His voice lowered. "Ravenshire." Clara stared at him. The evening sounds seemed to fade until only the leaves above them remained, trembling in the wind. "Who are you?" He reached inside his plain coat and removed a small silver signet ring bearing the same crest stamped across the sealed ledgers. "Nathaniel Whitmore." Clara recognized the name immediately. Everyone in the county knew it. The Duke whose arrival the Langley family had spent weeks preparing to celebrate. The man Vanessa expected to marry. Clara rose slowly, the letter held against her chest. "You allowed me to speak to you as though you had nothing. That was why I came disguised. You listened while they humiliated me. I was gathering proof. You watched me defend you while knowing one word from you could have ended it." Pain crossed his face. "If I had revealed myself too soon, the records would have disappeared." Clara looked at the open box, then at the man who had stood beside her beneath the summer sun and accepted water from her hand. "And what was I to you? Evidence of their cruelty?" "No." His answer came too quickly to be rehearsed. "You were the one thing I did not expect." The sincerity only deepened the wound. "You studied all of us, Your Grace. Do not pretend I was spared because you admired what you saw." Nathaniel took one step closer, then stopped when she moved back. "Clara, I should have told you before today." "Yes." She gathered the letter, seal, and account pages into the box. "You should have trusted me before asking for mine." From beyond the hedge came the faint rustle of fabric. Neither of them saw Vanessa withdraw into the shadows, but Clara noticed the smallest movement near the garden wall. She turned, listening. Nothing remained except the wind. Nathaniel looked toward the same place. "We must take those papers to Thomas." Clara closed the box. "No, I will decide where my father's truth goes." She walked away carrying the evidence, unaware that the letter inside was not the only copy Samuel Bennett had made, and that Vanessa now knew exactly what Clara had found. By nightfall, every window of Rosemont blazed with candlelight, and the house prepared to welcome the Duke of Ravenshire as though nothing beneath its roof had begun to collapse. Clara had hidden the tin box beneath a loose floorboard in her room, but when she returned after washing the soil from her hands, the board stood open. The letter was gone. The copied accounts had vanished with it. Only her father's seal remained, lying in the dust like a promise someone had tried to break. Clara crossed the corridor at once, but Aunt Eleanor blocked the staircase. "You will remain upstairs until the ball is over," she said. "Vanessa has told me enough about your conduct. She stole my father's letter." Eleanor's face tightened. "You have no proof." "That has never stopped this family from judging anyone else." Clara attempted to pass, but two housemaids stood uncertainly behind her aunt. They would not restrain her, yet their presence made Eleanor's intention clear. Clara returned to her room and locked the door, not to surrender, but to think. Samuel's notebook had been taken earlier, yet she had studied the figures long enough to remember their pattern. 3 false repairs. For tenant accounts. Payments transferred every quarter beneath changing descriptions. Vanessa could destroy paper, but she could not erase what Clara had learned. Downstairs, music began. Carriages rolled beneath the portico, delivering guests dressed in silk and black evening coats. Vanessa descended the staircase in silver satin, wearing the recovered bracelet and a smile untouched by guilt. At the far end of the ballroom, Thomas Reed watched the doors with growing concern. The Duke was expected at 9 o'clock. 9 passed. Then 10. Vanessa's confidence began to thin. Outside, Nathaniel stood in the servants' courtyard wearing the same rough coat Clara had first seen beneath the summer sun. Thomas approached with formal clothes prepared, but Nathaniel did not take them. "Your Grace, the guests are waiting. Let them see the man they believed beneath them. And Miss Bennet." Nathaniel looked toward the upper windows. "She has paid enough for my silence." Inside her room, Clara heard the key turn from the corridor side. Vanessa entered alone, holding Samuel's letter above the flame of a candle. "Looking for this?" Clara's breath stopped. "Give it back. Your father should have understood that poor men cannot afford principles." Vanessa touched one corner of the paper to the flame. Clara did not plead. "You can burn the letter. I remember the accounts." Vanessa's hand faltered. "No one will believe you." "Then why are you afraid?" Music continued below, bright and graceful, while the paper blackened at the edge. A knock sounded at the outer door. Vanessa extinguished the flame and concealed the damaged letter inside her sleeve. "You will stay here until I am Duchess of Ravenshire." She left, locking the room once more. Clara crossed to the window and saw the garden trellis below. The descent was 12 feet, difficult but possible. By the time Vanessa entered the ballroom, Clara was already moving through the dark corridor from the eastern terrace. The main doors opened. Nathaniel stepped inside wearing garden clothes marked with earth. Laughter moved through the room before anyone recognized him. Vanessa raised her voice. "Remove him from my house." Clara emerged beside the servants' passage just as 2 footmen approached. Nathaniel looked at her, regret visible beneath his calm. "Would you still defend me if you knew I had deceived you?" Clara stepped forward, though betrayal still ached within her. "A lie does not make cruelty honorable." Thomas Reed crossed the ballroom and bowed deeply. "Your Grace." Silence fell. Nathaniel removed his worn coat, revealing the silver crest beneath. "I am Nathaniel Whitmore, Duke of Ravenshire," he said. "And before this night ends, Miss Bennet will tell every person here what her father discovered." The ballroom remained silent as Nathaniel stepped away from Thomas Reed and faced the assembled guests. Candlelight struck the silver crest at his chest, but there was no triumph in his expression. He looked first at Clara, then at Vanessa. "I came to Rosemont in disguise because I no longer trusted the smiles offered to a title," he said. "I wished to see how this household behaved when it believed no power was watching." Vanessa recovered enough to lift her chin. "Your Grace, surely you understand that servants require discipline. Whatever you witnessed has been misunderstood." Nathaniel's gaze did not soften. "I understood perfectly." Aunt Eleanor gripped the back of a chair. Around her, guests who had laughed moments before now avoided one another's eyes. Nathaniel turned toward Clara. "But I also deceived someone who had given me no reason to doubt her. I watched while she was humiliated. I allowed her to defend me when one word from me could have spared her. That failure belongs to me." Clara had expected him to expose the Langleys. She had not expected him to expose himself. His confession did not erase the wound, but it changed the room. He was not using his title to stand above judgment. He was placing himself within it. "The letter," Clara said, looking at Vanessa. "Return it." Vanessa gave a brittle laugh. "There is no letter." Clara stepped into the center of the ballroom. Her hands were empty, yet her voice remained steady. "Then I will speak from memory." She named the 4 tenant accounts her father had copied. She recited the false repairs charged against the southern farms, the quarterly transfers hidden beneath changing descriptions, and the years in which winter grain money had disappeared. Thomas opened the sealed Ravenshire ledger on a nearby table. One by one, he confirmed the figures. A murmur spread through the guests. Vanessa's face lost its color. "Numbers can be misunderstood," she said. "Not when they repeat for 6 years," Clara replied. Nathaniel did not interrupt. This was her father's truth, and he allowed her to carry it. Clara described how Samuel Bennet had discovered the missing rents and how he had been dismissed before he could report them. She did not plead for sympathy. She offered dates, amounts, and names. The precision of her memory left no room for easy denial. At last, Nathaniel faced Vanessa. "You accused an innocent man of theft while your family concealed far greater losses." Vanessa's composure finally broke. "You were meant to marry me. I was advised to consider an alliance," he said. "I was never promised to you. And you would throw away Rosemont because of her?" Nathaniel looked toward Clara. "Rosemont was never mine to throw away, nor is Miss Bennet." The distinction silenced the room again. Thomas summoned the county solicitor, who had been waiting in the adjoining library with copies of the estate accounts. Nathaniel ordered a formal inquiry into the Langley finances, but Clara was the one who identified the final false entry, a payment made under the name of a gardener who had died 3 years before. Vanessa's eyes moved toward her sleeve. Clara saw it. "The letter is there." For several seconds, Vanessa did not move. Then Aunt Eleanor stepped forward, reached into her daughter's sleeve, and withdrew the singed page. She placed it in Clara's hands without speaking. The edges were darkened, but Samuel Bennet's words remained legible. Nathaniel read the final lines aloud, restoring Samuel's name before every person who had accepted his disgrace. Then he announced that the Bennet property and all withheld income would be returned to Clara. Applause began uncertainly, but Clara did not smile. Nathaniel approached her only after the room had emptied around them. "I can repair the record," he said. "I cannot repair what I did to your trust." Clara held her father's letter against her heart. "Tonight you revealed the Duke." Her eyes met his. "I still do not know whether the gardener was ever real." 6 months later, the Bennet garden opened beside a clear stone well on land that had once belonged to Clara's father. Rows of lavender, feverfew, mint, and rosemary stretched beneath the autumn sun, while families from the southern farms carried home bundles of herbs and clean water without charge. Clara kept Samuel Bennet's restored ledger in a locked cabinet inside the small garden house, not as a relic of disgrace, but as proof that truth could survive even when powerful people tried to bury it. The inquiry had returned the stolen rents, corrected the estate records, and removed the Langley family from control of Rosemont. Vanessa had left the county with Aunt Eleanor, and Nathaniel had refused every suggestion that he use the scandal to claim the manor for himself. Instead, he placed Rosemont under independent management, raised the wages of the gardeners, repaired the tenant wells, and published the accounts where every family could examine them. He sent Clara no jewels. He made no public declarations. For months, he allowed his actions to speak where his disguise had once made words untrustworthy. Clara heard of the changes from farmers who came for remedies and from children who proudly carried new school books paid for by the restored rents. Still, Nathaniel did not visit. Then, on a cool afternoon scented with fallen leaves, Clara saw a solitary figure walking along the garden path. He wore a simple dark coat and carried no signet ring in sight, but this time nothing about him was hidden. Nathaniel stopped several feet from her beside a row of young rose bushes. "I was told these need water," he said. Clara looked toward the well. "Most visitors begin by asking permission to enter. Then I should begin again." His gray eyes held no practiced authority. "May I come into your garden?" She studied him for a long moment before nodding. Nathaniel stepped through the wooden gate and remained near it, waiting for her to decide the distance between them. "Why did you stay away?" Clara asked. "Because an apology offered too often becomes another demand." "And why come now?" "Because I have finished correcting what I could correct without asking anything from you." He looked across the garden, where the late sunlight rested on the stone paths. "I cannot return the trust one took. I can only tell you the truth and accept what you choose to do with it." Clara folded her hands before her. Was Elias Hale real? Nathaniel's expression softened with sadness. more real than I expected him to be. He was the man I became when no one bowed, when I worked beside people instead of ruling over them, and when a woman offered me water without knowing I could repay her. But he was also a lie. Yes, the answer came without defense. I used that name to enter your life without your consent. I will regret that even if you never forgive me. Clara turned toward the well, lifted the old copper cup bearing the Bennett crest, and filled it with clear water. She carried it back to him, but did not place it in his hand immediately. What do you want, Nathaniel? He looked at the cup, then at her. Permission to begin without disguise. The simplicity of the request moved through her more deeply than any title could have done. Clara gave him the water. He drank, then returned the cup with both hands. She pointed toward the unfinished rose bed. The roots are too dry. Nathaniel removed his coat, set it over the gate, and took up the watering can. He worked beside her until the shadows lengthened, asking before he moved each plant and listening when she answered. No servants watched. No guests whispered. No one bowed. When evening settled over the garden, Clara placed her hand lightly over his on the wooden handle. You may return tomorrow, she said. Nathaniel smiled, not as a duke receiving favor, but as a man grateful to be trusted with one more day. True kindness does not wait for a crown to reveal a person's worth, and true love begins only when both hearts are finally allowed to meet without disguise.